About noon, so we'll go ahead and get started, and folks can join us as they continue to come in. But welcome everyone to today's professional development event in the TLC Professional Development Series. We'll start today with a land acknowledgement.
Hey Noah, can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. All right, here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilized the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. Before we get started with today's event, a couple reminders. You are currently a part of the TLC Professional Development event. If you attend enough of these events, as a graduate student or faculty member, you can earn a certificate, or if you're a faculty member, you can earn a fellowship. And I've dropped the information in the chat for you to review at your leisure. Next week, we have Dr. Alex Redcorn, who will be presenting our series on education in indigenous communities. And the following week, we're really excited to have Dr. Clarissa Steele talking about ChatGPT. Again, this is a pretty hot topic in higher education right now. There are actually a lot of other events about AI and ChatGPT that will be taking place on campus that week, and Ashley's dropped that information in the chat. But we are so excited that you're here today to hear from Dr. Camilla Roberts, the Director of the Honor and Integrity System, on bringing integrity back to basics. And we'll happily pass it on to Dr. Roberts. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks. When I get my screen going, maybe. For some reason, when I say pull up my screen, it does not want to pull up anything.
That's how it always works.
I know. This gives me like this, the triangle of death. So what I might do is I might just chat and talk. I can actually now get the screen share thing going away. Because for some reason it is not wanting me to share screen. So we will deal with that. I will, what I'll do, Noah and Ashley, is I can send you my slides. The slides really just have text on them. So I can send them to you, and then I know this is being recorded, and maybe you can put a link to them or something. Does that work?
Yeah,
yes,
that
we
totally
can definitely
works.
do that.
Okay. Sorry, I have a feeling this is a new computer, and so this might be the first time I've had to share a screen. So I apologize that I did not prep it, evidently. So, but it is okay. We will make do. Let me just change up a few things while I can see the Zoom room a little bit better, which is good. So what I want to do today is, as we think about all the changes in the educational landscape and just even what's going on in our country, in the world, I mean, there's so much stuff and changes going on, and could be stress, could add stress to us. And when we talk about, I'm glad that over the next couple weeks, there'll be more information about ChatGPT, and other artificial intelligence. That is, of course, definitely a big topic in what's been going on, not only in academic integrity, but I think even in the broader sense of education, because just as a side note for me, and I've shared this before, that ChatGPT for me has not been a huge concern in terms of making sure, in terms of thinking about policy changes. And so I've made that mention. Now, yes, I've had many cases, been talking with lots of people about ChatGPT. What does it mean? And how can we educate? But that's kind of where I come to the idea of our time today, is really looking at what does it mean to bring integrity back to the basics. So if we really think about what does it mean to have and teach our students the idea of integrity, even when we have this changing landscape of the educational system and of the nation, and trying to figure out what's important for people and what's not. So today we're going to talk and bring it down what I consider the basics. And just to give you a little background of where I'm getting this from. So my master's and my PhD are both in higher ed, so student affairs, and higher ed administration. So my initial work experience was all in university housing. So my background is really in the idea of student development and figuring out where are our students coming from and how can we meet them where they're at and help them be successful. So as Noah said, I'm currently the director of the Honor and Integrity System. And I find it interesting that really I started this position, well, 15 years ago. And it was because of the student affairs and student development background that I think I probably even got the position, because they wanted somebody who had the connection with the students, who had some of that counseling background to be able to maybe tell the students some tough choices that they had to make, or some tough decisions that we might have to make for them. And so I'm going to, throughout my time in the Honor and Integrity System, I've really seen more of a connection between the academic integrity and the student development side of things, when I didn't really know that from the beginning whatsoever. I really fell into academic integrity. And so I really see how closely connected they are. Over the past couple of years, I've become more and more involved in the International Center for Academic Integrity. And what that is our international organization that has members from all over the globe. So that also means differing educational systems. And so with those different educational systems, you can't think about curriculum the same way. You can't think about even the age of the students the same way. And so we bring it down to the basics, and it's those basics are our fundamental values of academic integrity. And so the International Center for Academic Integrity says that there are 6 values that I want to talk to you about, give you some examples, but really look at how we can be able to teach our students and help our students understand these fundamental values, because that's what's going to help them in the future. And so I apologize you're not able to look at this on the screen, but our fundamental values of academic integrity are honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, and courage. And in each of these values, they can really be looked at through the lens of a variety of different lenses. So if you think about these values, many of you might be a graduate student or a teacher, so you're probably can look at it through the teaching perspective. But I encourage, as we talk about these, and I'll give some examples for you to look at it, one, through the student perspective, but also from a third perspective. And the third perspective is that of integrity beyond the classroom. So I'm sure you actually just heard in the land acknowledgement that K-State is a land grant institution. And if you haven't looked at the mission recently, I'm going to read you the mission of K-State. It says, the mission of Kansas State University is to foster excellent teaching, research, and service that develop a highly skilled and educated citizenry necessary to advancing the well-being of Kansas, the nation, and the international community. So when I think about our daily tasks as faculty and staff, graduate students, those in front of our students, our daily task is to create that good citizen, that highly skilled and educated citizen, so that when our students graduate K-State, then they're able to, according to our mission, advance the well-being of Kansas, the nation, and that international community. So I know that I can see that our students are using ChatGPT. I can see that our students are copying from Chegg. I can see that some of our students are buying papers online. That some of them are falsifying deaths of grandparents to be able to gain extra time for their assignments or their tests. But I think the main thing that we have to bring it back to is, what kind of person are they going to be when they graduate? What kind of person are they going to be in that larger sense, and helping them see these fundamental values beyond just the classroom? I know they might not call it academic integrity when they're in the working world. But I think that for us, especially in this changing landscape of higher education, we have to bring it back to these basics so that we can hopefully have that better tomorrow, that our students do truly understand these fundamental values. I was mentioning earlier, right before we got started, that I was at a conference last week in Mexico, and it was an international conference, but mainly focused for those individuals in Latin America, South America, Mexico, that area. And one of the individuals made a comment that really has stuck with me, that the time that our students are in college, it's a living lab to make ethical decisions. And so when I think about, if we want our students to have a high level of ability to make ethical decisions, now is the time for them to be able to try those out. Now's the time for them to possibly fail at those, or to have a learning experience with them. And so that's why I'm saying we need to get back to these fundamental values, these 6 basic things that are teaching our students the idea of integrity, not only the academic integrity, but the integrity from beyond. Now, if we look at these fundamental values, and we'll go through them individually, and I'll retell you what they are as well. They seem very straightforward to start off with. But that's why I want to encourage you to really think about looking at it from the different perspectives, and think about how you might be able to incorporate this into your classroom. And when we finish up, I've got more, I guess, direct things that you can do. And then also I'll tie it back to how it relates to that fundamental values. So the first fundamental value was honesty. When we think about honesty, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell the truth. But if we think about it from the different perspectives, our students need to be honest in the times that they are providing the appropriate citations, that they're giving factual information. I'd say one of many of the complaints about the artificial intelligence, the large, the ChatGPT, all those different artificial intelligence software, is that not all the information is true that they give you. I don't know how much you've been able to play around with it, but I encourage you to put in information. Those programs will be able to spit out information that sounds good, but not all of it is true. And so we want our students, from a student's perspective, to be honest, to be very truthful, to make sure that the information they're providing us is factual information and not false. From the faculty perspective, in terms of honesty, we want our faculty to keep promises. So if they tell them what is going to be on an assessment, that's what's actually going to be assessed. That they provide credit to the student when they say that credit is actually due. And they also aspire to objectivity, that they consider all sides of the story or all sides of the perspective, and then also realize any of their own potential preconceptions of that, and being upfront and honest and saying, I'm coming from this lens, and that is being able to help those students. But if we think about beyond the classroom, how do we want our business folks to be honest? How do we want those who are in engineering to be honest? That if there's a timeline, that you're actually going to follow through on that timeline. We see this especially in Manhattan with construction projects all the time. What's that timeline going to be? Now, yes, there's things that impact timelines, but it's being upfront and honest and saying, okay, the weather has affected this. We're going to have to change this. And I'm not saying it's not, you're lacking integrity if your timeline has to change, but it's being upfront and honest, and thinking about, were you able to complete a project on time? If you say you're going to do it, that you've actually followed through with it, and considering all sides of the situation before making that decision. That's what we're expecting out of our businesses and the corporations that we work with. And so if we're expecting that, we're having to teach our students that at this point too. The second value is trust. And with trust, we want to build a relationship between our students and our faculty, that there is a level of trust between both of them, that our students are trusting the professors, they're trusting them to provide information that is necessary for the class. But then we're also trusting our students to follow and trust their fellow students when they're put into group projects, that they're trusting that their fellow students are actually going to follow through and do what they've said they're going to do. We want for our faculty, I encourage you to give your students reasons to trust you. Be able to tell them, say, I'm going to be very open in this class. This is what we're going to be learning. This is how I'm going to assess you. And when you follow through with that, that trust is there. Beyond the classroom, we're always looking for transparency. That's something I think we hear about even more so in higher education than maybe even in the corporate world, that people want transparency. But if you think about, and I believe it was about 2015, early 2000s. No, it was before 2015. Now I can't remember the exact date, but the scandal that occurred with Volkswagen. Volkswagen was doing emissions testing, and they claimed that all of their emissions testing was below the amount that was kind of the standard amount. And what it turned out is that they were falsifying those tests and those records. Well, once the truth came out, that really hurt Volkswagen. It hurt their sales, it hurt their reputation. And so it goes back to the idea when we're thinking about trust, that sometimes it takes a little bit to build trust, but it only takes one small thing to hurt the trust. And so if we need to make sure that we're coming into the classroom each and every semester saying, okay, I'm giving you trust. Don't make me take it away. Don't make me lose my trust in you, but openly give it to start from. Because when you're trusting of the students, it is often very reciprocal, and they'll trust you as well. So we talked about honesty, we talked about trust. The third value is fairness. And fairness, we want our students to take responsibility. I know responsibility is another one of our values, but with our fairness, we want to make sure that they're not placing the blame on others, that they're also engaging with others, that they're making sure that in a group project that people are doing an appropriate amount of work, and they do take that responsibility to follow through with making sure things are across the board, students are doing what they need to do and equitably. Our faculty members, they need to be remembering how to be equitable and how you work with individuals. No preferential treatment to individuals, no preferential treatment to whether a student is part of an organization or not, or whether they have come to your office hours or they haven't, and applying rules and policies very consistently. But then if we think about beyond that classroom, what does it mean to be fair in the corporate world? It means being consistent, keeping an open mind. And that's what, again, we want with our corporations. We want them to be very consistent. We don't want to be treated one way and then the next person in line to be treated 100% differently. We want one of those corporations to be fair. The next one is respect. And respect, like I said earlier, can be built and it can be reciprocated. That when our faculty members are respecting our students, in many cases, our students will respect our faculty members. It is in academic integrity research, it shows that our students that have a high level of respect for the faculty member that they're a part of are less likely to violate the honor pledge in that classroom, because they want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. They want to make their teacher proud. And so when that respect is there, it makes things easier in terms of integrity. So our students, when they're looking at respect, part of the things they have to learn is how to receive feedback, how to receive it in a way that whether it's positive or negative. And start also learning how to give that respectful feedback of, these are my opinions. It doesn't matter if we agree or we disagree, we're still going to respect each other. Our students also, throughout respect, are affirming each other. They're understanding where each other are at. They understand that, oh, I've got a busy week this week, so I'm going to do it next week. I'm going to work on this project the next week. But they understand that people have differing timings of their life experiences and things that are going on. And so they're trying to make sure that they are showing that respect for their fellow students. Our faculty show respect by how they interact with their students. Now, an interesting thing that came out of my conference last week was actually the idea of adding a 7th fundamental value. And I think we definitely see this, especially starting with respect, that the 7th fundamental value that was suggested is the idea of compassion. And I've as I've thought about that for the past few days, I really think that could definitely play an impact, and compassion could definitely be one of those, a 7th fundamental value of integrity, but even more so of how do you live out these other values of integrity. So if we think about respect, showing empathy or compassion to our students, again, understanding the things that are going on in their life. That doesn't mean giving them hundreds. It doesn't mean allowing them to always make up tests, but showing compassion and working with that student and to allow that student to be successful in your class shows that respect. Another part of respect is accepting that others' ideas might be different and practicing active listening with your students. So you're actually, again, coming up and showing up with compassion to be able to hear what they have to say and show that empathy of what's going on in the classroom. And then we think about respect beyond that classroom in the corporate business world. We're seeing more and more corporate and business worlds thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, affirming and accepting differences, and understanding that people do have differing opinions and we can still respect them as an individual, especially when those differences are not at these core values. It would be very difficult to respect somebody who's showing no honesty and no trust, no fairness. But if they truly just have a differing point of view on how a project should be done, we can still respect them as an individual and realize that we just have differing viewpoints. So again, we've talked about honesty, trust, fairness, respect, and the next one is responsibility. For our students, if you're thinking of it from that student perspective, following through with the tasks, holding yourself accountable, the student holding themselves accountable. For our faculty members, we all have a responsibility to know and understand the rules and policies of the institution. So if there is an honor pledge violation, making sure that you understand, I really need to report this. I need to call Camilla and ask her what I need to do, so I understand that. And making sure that you're following through when your syllabus says, should there be an honor pledge violation or an alleged violation, this is what I'm going to do, that you're actually following through with that. That's part of your responsibility. And modeling good behavior. So if you want your students to cite things in APA style of citation, that you also are citing things in APA style of citation, but you also go beyond that. You have the responsibility of helping them understand and giving them the tools, whether it's a 15-minute presentation on the APA style of citation, or giving them the information on who to go to for the library to be able to help them learn about the different citation styles. That's part of our responsibility. And so if we think about beyond the classroom, we're always looking for responsible corporations, fiscally responsible, politically responsible, Making sure we want our corporations and our businesses to engage in difficult conversations and be up to date on what's going on with the world. And if our students don't learn that way to be responsible when they're here in the classroom, it's going to be very difficult for them to learn it when they're in that corporation in the working world. Then the sixth, the final fundamental value is courage. And the sixth value was actually added later. We started off with 5 fundamental values, and then the sixth one was added saying that you have to have courage to live out any of the other fundamental values. And so that's actually kind of why I think that a possible 7th might be coming in terms of compassion, because not only living these fundamental values out with courage, but you have to have courage along with compassion. So if we think about courage, our students, we're asking them to take a stand to address wrongdoing. At K-State, we do not have a mandatory reporting policy, so our students aren't required to report something, but we are very hopeful that when they see something, that they either talk to that student, they talk to a faculty member, or if in terms of outside of academic integrity, that if they see some kind of wrongdoing, that they actually support those involved, if it's going against somebody, but then also bring in the appropriate people to be able to support everybody. For our faculty, we want you to defend integrity. We want you to be able to talk honestly and openly about integrity. This is where I would encourage you to have courage to look at your own profession, career, and figure out, why does it really matter to even have integrity in the first place, and be able to share that with your students, to be able to say, this is why this is important. If we think back to the beyond the classroom in terms of courage, think back to Lance Armstrong, famous cyclist, when he had his drug tests that were going wrong for him, and Nike. Well, Nike had a very large financial impact or connection with Livestrong and Lance Armstrong. But they realized that this is not the kind of brand that we want to have. And so it did take quite a bit of courage. They had to figure out, should we drop Lance? Should we not? Do we give him a second chance? They had to really think about it, because they knew there was some financial ramifications for that. But they also probably thought about, there's also some ramifications if we were to keep him on and people know what he's done. That's not the kind of brand that we want. So beyond the classroom, in the corporate world, encourage, we want our corporations to be able to, one, be able to take a risk and risk some failure, but also be willing to stand and address that something is wrong. And our students, like I said at the beginning, they said that my colleague said in Mexico, that this is the living lab to make those decisions, the living lab for ethical decisions. And so encouraging our students to take up and have that courage to stand up for what's right and what's wrong. So those are the 6 fundamental values as we have it right now. What I want to do now is kind of combine them with the idea of student development. And so there's definitely some reasons why we know that students cheat. And some of you probably have heard these from me before, that some students cheat because there's opportunities to do so. Some students cheat because they're under pressure or stress. This is a very common one. The higher the stress, the more students make poor choices. Just like anybody, if we have a lot of stress, we sometimes don't always make the best choice. Some students cheat because there's no connection to the course. It was interesting that I talked with the math graduate students, and I don't know if anybody math graduate student, but I talked to them a few weeks ago, and I was talking with them about the idea that most of the classes they're teaching are classes with students who intentionally chose their major because they did not want to have to take any math. And so they're taking 1 or 2 introductory to college algebra, just something that just to check the box that they've done it. And so they're not seeing the connection with the course. And so that's part of our responsibility, again, to think about, okay, how can I make sure that the students understand that even though this course is not in their major, it might not be something they absolutely love, that there's still a reason for this class. And it goes back to the idea of that our mission at Kansas State is not to teach them about biology, about chemistry, about social sciences, or about certain topics. The mission is to create a good citizen that they can go out. And so that's that broad scope. And so helping them understand that all these courses, even though they might not love them, are still part of that, and helping them make decisions even in that course, and helping them learn that even when I don't want to do something, I have to, or even though when the project is very hard or the homework is very difficult, I know how to take my time and do it correctly rather than going online and finding it on Chegg or having another person do it for me. Another reason why students cheat is fairness. Now, fairness was one of those fundamental values, so it can be seen both ways. But the way that we see fairness in terms of why students cheat, and I saw this in particular during the COVID time, is that I would hear students say, well, everybody else is doing it, so I have to do it as well. They wanted to keep up. And so I think it's very important that we create the idea of the standard at Kansas State is that our students do not cheat. And so that way they do not see others doing it. And then another reason why students cheat is sometimes they don't know what constitutes cheating. And again, that goes back to our responsibility as faculty and staff and graduate students in front of the classroom of making sure that we examine and explain why, what constitutes cheating, and helping them understand that we are responsible to report actions. If they don't think that anybody's watching, they don't think they're going to be caught, there's a good chance they might not have that, might have a violation. So looking at pretty quickly, I'm going to go through 3 different theories. And some of these you might have heard about if you have any kind of background in student development, but I think it really does help us understand how the student development is directly related to how we interact with our students in terms of these fundamental values. So the first one is Aston's theory of challenge and support. And basically what Aston is saying is that for all of our students, if you give them a challenge, they will be successful if you also give them the support. And they will continue to grow. So the higher, the stronger the challenge, the more growth there is, as long as there's support there. So we said that sometimes students feel stress because how hard a class is, or they have other activities going on, things going on in their life. And that stress can be harmful in terms of making that poor choice to violate the honor pledge, make a poor choice to go somewhere and get additional help. But if our students feel stressed because how hard of a class it is, we're not exactly sure what to do with a project, that stress, if we're not responsible for giving them also that support, whether it be office hours, working with them, breaking the assignment down into scaffolding assignments, so it's not a huge assignment at the very end, it still has that ending challenge. We're helping them get from point A to point B, but we're supporting them along the way. And that appropriate level of support leads to that student's success. So no matter that challenge, as long as that support is there, they'll be successful, and be successful in a way that often would not have academic misconduct. The second theory is Perry's theory of intellectual and ethical development. And for this one, Perry thinks that in traditional age college students are coming in with a very dualistic mindset, that when they're having to make a decision about what is right or wrong, they're expecting and wanting to have received knowledge, meaning that they are being told by somebody who is an authority figure of this is the information. There's no gray area. It's purely black and white. As they are told to start thinking and for themselves, start moving to the second stage, which is multiplicity. And this is a state of subjective knowledge, when they start to listen to their own voice. And they've also started to realize that not everything has a direct answer, because when they first were coming, everything had an answer. They want to know exactly what it is. You think about multiple choice tests, true, false. There's one answer. And as our students develop into that multiplicity, they're realizing, well, maybe there can be two answers, or maybe there's not even an answer at all. Maybe we just have to have an opinion on something. And as they continue to develop, they move into relativism or procedural knowledge, where they're actually trying to examine things based upon a context that they've seen before, or maybe that they've heard about. So that things become relative to one another, and they're able to make decisions based upon that relative thought process. But the final stage that we want our students to get to is a commitment. And this is where they actually can construct their own knowledge. So they're deciding between right and wrong based upon their lived experiences, as well as what they have learned from others. But if we think about it in terms of academic integrity, those first-year students, those dualistic students, they might think that the only way they can pass the class is by using ChatGPT or buying a paper online. That passing of that class allows them to keep their scholarship. So they have to make the decision, and they think there's only, in their mind, that there's only two options. Use some sort of academic misconduct and pass the class and keep the scholarship, or don't use academic misconduct, fail the class, lose the scholarship. There's no middle ground. And so when we're thinking about our younger students in particular, this is the way that they're coming, and it's very difficult for them. As they start to mature a little bit and learn a little bit more about their ethical decision-making skills, they might start thinking about, well, this class in that same scenario, well, this class is not really that important in terms of it's only 1 credit hour. I'll do my best, but if I happen to not pass the class, or if I make a C in the class, it's not going to hurt my GPA too much. They're starting to be very subjective, that there's not really a right or a wrong answer of, should I cheat to keep my scholarship, or should I not cheat and keep my scholarship and not keep my scholarship? There's no really right or wrong, that they're seeing that maybe there's more to this story to figure out. So then as that same student, as they continue to grow, they're going to be starting to think about, in that relativism stage, the context of hearing about the consequences, maybe being afraid to getting caught, but they've learned about the honor and integrity system throughout their time. They maybe have had friends go through the process, and they're realizing, okay, I know that there's a chance that I would get caught. I also know that that K-State has an honor pledge, and I want to make sure I uphold that. I also realize I want to be respectful to my teacher. So they're trying to look at everything that they've seen occur in their life, and versus what their friends have seen in their life, to kind of create their best, figure out what their best option is. But then what we really want our students to get to is that constructed knowledge, that commitment to an ethical choice. And this is where our students do think about all the resources on campus, that they realize that a sanction can be very detrimental to them, that they realize they're putting it all together, and they're able to construct a decision that they think is best for them. And hopefully that they decide that they're doing their own work. Now, the interesting part about Perry's theory is that in a linear form, our students are traditionally developing between first-year students and the graduating students, graduate students. But when there's under stress, they can move in the opposite direction. So think about a time of stress for our students, whatever it might be, and they just want to know, well, tell me what to do. Tell me what's going to be on the assignment. Where when they're with low stress, they're moving along in their life, they're able to figure out things on their own. And so when that stress is introduced, it becomes harder for our students to move through that process. And then the last theory that I do want to talk about is Chickering and Reiser's 7 vectors of student development. And I'm only really going to talk about the last one, because the very last vector is developing integrity. Of these 7 vectors, Chickering and Reiser said that students do traditionally go through from top to bottom. So the very first one is developing competence. So understanding how they can actually do work, and making that change. If we think back to our high school years, that the tests of that and how we had to study for high school was probably nothing like we had to study for college. And a lot of our incoming freshmen and maybe even sophomores are still trying to develop that, wow, I've got to learn how to study. I've got to learn how to take different tests. That's that developing competence. The second one is managing emotions and understanding that, okay, how do you make that ethical decision? How do you realize that we can have a disagreement, but we don't have to blow up at each other. We don't have to hate each other. We can have a different opinions. Our students then are moving through autonomy to interdependence. So they're realizing that there are people that can help them, that they do not have to be 100% on their own in this world, but they also are not dependent on them. Our students are developing mature and interpersonal relationships. So they're figuring out, again, how to work with people. Then they're also establishing their identity and developing their purpose. But all of those are leading to the idea of developing integrity, because they have to have a lot of those other ideas grounded in themselves before that integrity. So if we think about, if Chickering and Reiser, who of course has done quite a bit of research on student development, if they're saying that in most cases our students are not developing integrity, one, they might not have come to campus with a fully developed sense of integrity, and then they're still developing that throughout their academic career, then that tells me a lot, that saying that we can't necessarily expect our students to have that high level of integrity. But then if we combine that with Aston's theory of challenge and support, is that, yes, I'm going to expect that you have integrity, but I'm now also going to give you the support and the resources to help you learn how to live a life of integrity. And so I think that's where it comes back to the idea of how do we bring things back to the basics of making sure that our students are, that we're not making assumptions for our students, that we're not making assumptions that they know exactly what to do, how to do it, without us telling them. And we're giving them the appropriate amount of support to be able to help them to be very successful. So now, what all do we do with this? If we think about our students, it's beneficial to understand our needs of our students. It's very important to understand that idea of challenge and support and building the community of integrity. So many of these fundamental values are built in to a community. And so what does that community look like for you? One, our classroom expectations. I encourage you to allow your students to be a part of that development of your classroom expectations. Whether it's expectations for individual work, expectations for group work, expectations for when we're actually in the classroom, expectations for our class discussions, expectations for out of class assignments. Having those conversations and allowing those students to be a part of it builds that community of integrity and that culture of integrity, so they truly feel a part of who they are, like who they are as part of that classroom. They feel safe and included in that classroom. And that leads then to the respect and the trust that we want our students to have of our faculty members and for you to have of your students. And then also understanding our students helps us with our institutional expectations. K-State is very much of an educational based honor and integrity system. Very rarely are our students asked to leave the institution. It's traditionally only if students have had multiple subsequent violations that especially have increased in severity over their time. But in most cases, we want our students to be successful, and the honor and integrity system and the honor council that works within the honor and integrity system has that viewpoint of making sure that our students are learning and understanding that there is a bigger picture, that this is their time to learn. It's a time to possibly make some mistakes, but the sanctions or the consequences while they're here on campus are probably going to be a lot less than what consequences could happen in the business, in the corporate world. And so we want our students to understand that. So what are some things that you can do? And this is where I wanted to tie it back to some direct things and tied and directly back to the fundamental values. So the first one is looking at assessment styles. And this is something that has really been a hot topic in terms of academic integrity, and even course design to a certain degree, especially since COVID, as we transitioned assessments all online, and we realized not all assessments are the same, and we had to think about what are we doing with assessments. But first of all, in terms of fairness, so that fundamental value of fairness. Fairness does not always mean equal, but let's look at our assessment styles for our first-year students versus our graduate students. I'm hoping that you definitely see that the assessments and the projects that you would give a graduate student should probably not be the same thing you're giving to your Chemistry 101 class or any of your first-year students classes. But if we thinking about again, how our students make decisions and how they learn things, a lot of our first-year students are coming out of that idea of, my teachers always told me exactly what I need to learn. I have 2 children, got one in middle school, and I can guarantee that right now, we were studying last night her social studies study guide. If she learns that study guide, she will have absolutely no problem on the test, because it is truly, here's the question, here's the answer, and you're going to see that exact thing on the test. And so if we think about the idea of dualistic versus multiplicity and how students are making those decisions, it is important for us to, again, we want to challenge our students, but also add that idea of fairness and making sure that we are respecting where our students are and meeting them where they are while still challenging them and supporting them. If we look at our assessments in terms of teams versus individual, this focuses on the idea of respect and honesty. For our students in particular, thinking about how can they work together? To what degree can our students work together? And then also looking at the assessments in terms of teams as part of the grade. So assessments from the teams, meaning will the teams actually create their own assessments on each other so that you as an instructor actually kind of have a glance at what actually happened within the class group, because you're not at all those group meetings. And so having the student be honest, but in a respectful way, to saying, student B never came to any of our group meetings. They didn't do any part of this assignment, whatever it might be that they're going to report back. Or this student took the leadership role. They always made sure we had a place to meet. And so making sure that that idea of assessments in teams is truly understood by the student, and understanding how they're going to be held accountable for that and to what degree do they work together. We talked about rules and policies and regulations within the classroom in terms of creating that culture of integrity, and those directly relate back to the idea of respect and honesty, and helping our students understand that we are going to have a level of respect within the classroom. We're going to be honest and upfront with each other. And that builds that community, and making sure that our students know if they're honest in the classroom, they will be respected, that they're not going to be looked down upon because they said something that others might not agree with 100%. I've talked a lot about this already, that we have to support our students. Now, I'd want to make sure that we're not hand-holding our students. There is a level of allowing them to be challenged and allowing them to come back and help you. And so that idea of reiterating things is a respect and a responsibility, but it's making sure that we're working with our students and helping our students be successful. So that is teaching them the idea of what type of citation style should we be using. That is part of our responsibility, but it's also teaching that respect that, listen, I'm going to teach this to you, and now I'm going to expect this of you as a faculty member to the student. It's again our responsibility to determine, again, with assessments, what is authentic learning? What do we really want our students to be learning through this assessment? What is this assessment telling us? And then also looking at those lower stakes of assessments that I talked about in terms of stress. The higher stake assessments lead to a higher amount of stress, which can lead to a violation of the honor pledge. So if we're able to build in some lower stake assessments and truly have those assessments mean something, so it's not just our, we're not just grading something just for the chance to grade things, then it's allowing us to be responsible to our students. Respect, trust, and courage all goes back to the idea of helping them find a source of motivation. It takes some courage to talk about this, especially in classes where you know that a good part of your class does not want to be there. How do we help them find the motivation to be there? They could be maybe allowing them to decide the topics within a reason. But also talking about your class about why is integrity important. So really look at maybe the code of conducts that are in your profession. Talk about those. It's very easy to do so in engineering with code of conduct, that if you were to take a shortcut as a civil engineer, you build a bridge, people's lives could be at stake. Over on our Salina campus, our students in professional pilots program, I always get nervous if I've got a case that comes through and it's a student taking a shortcut on trying to figure out how they can land a plane. I want our students to know how to land that plane if I'm going to get on that plane. And so helping them find that source of motivation, even if that class is not one that they really are excited to be a part of. Another thing with honesty is I encourage you to let our students see examples of good, mediocre, and maybe even poor work, providing a rubric for quality rather than just a grade. Being upfront and honest is going to help them understand what is expected of them. And again, reduce some of the stress, and then also they'll learn that respect towards you. And then the last thing that I have one thing that you can definitely do is, again, holding them accountable. And this is the fundamental values of courage and responsibility. That students who know that you'll hold them accountable are less likely to try to do something inappropriate. Now I can help you hold them accountable and I can help you figure out how you should hold them accountable, but it is actually you and your responsibility in the classroom to actually start that process. Our students are required to have due process. That is one of their rights. And so I mentioned earlier that we don't have a mandatory reporting style at K-State, with the exception of if you are a faculty member and you take a grade away, then our students do have that right to due process, and you do need to report it to us. So to kind of finish this up, and we'll have a few minutes for questions, academic misconduct can never be eliminated. It can be minimized, maybe reduced and lessened, but new challenges are going to continue to evolve. I've heard many people comparing the idea of ChatGPT from when calculators were first kind of introduced. It's like, oh, people are not going to know anything about math. They're just going to use calculators. Well, we had to build calculators into our curriculum and our processes. That's kind of my mentality of ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. It's here to stay, and that might be a little challenge, might be a road bump, but how do we either use that, or how do we teach our students about it so that they don't use it in terms of an academic misconduct? It does take time to be vigilant and engaged, but I would say if we focus on the prevention of misconduct, that's where we're going to be have a better success rate in terms of helping our students, because again, we're allowing them to be in this living lab of ethical decision making at this point in time of their life, and it is a safe place for them to be able to make some of those decisions. But I know that it can be very frustrating for you all, especially if you're in that faculty role, when you do have those violations, because you are trying to teach those students, why is this important? What's the basics of integrity? And then when they still make that poor choice, it can be very frustrating. But I encourage you to continue to have the courage to do what's right. And I encourage you to do it with compassion, to meet those students where they're at, to show empathy to them, and show them that respect that is really necessary. If you do have a violation, please contact me if you need assistance. We do encourage you to address the issue with that student. It's that idea of showing compassion, to go to that student first, just like we would want if somebody has a problem with us or has a concern. Many times we don't want them going to our boss. We want them to come to us first. And then you can still follow up with that documentation with my office, follow up with takedown notices, whether it be on Chegg or Course Hero. there's different things that we can help you with. But if we really, again, think about this idea of not necessarily academic integrity in the classroom only, but bringing it bigger picture and focusing on those 6 fundamental values, but adding compassion to it, I think that's where we're going to be able to help our students the best. And so I've got a couple minutes, I think, for some questions. I had a couple people ask about the slides, and there was a concern with never could get my screen share to work. So I will be sending the slides to Noah and Ashley, and they will be posting them. So.
Thank you, Camilla. Actually, I do have a question. So you talked a lot about responsibility, fairness, lots of reasons for why we would want to get involved in this. These are really emotionally heavy for the instructor who's going to get involved in this. And oftentimes, it makes us feel like we're going against that mission of supporting our students in their learning. But especially if I'm on a term contract, a 1-year contract, or I'm a GTA or something like that, and I might be worried that engaging in this might actually negatively affect my teaching evaluations, which may be overweighted in determining whether I get to be employed here. So I'm wondering kind of what you could talk about in that kind of scenario and what we should do.
You're the one I need to be talking with, actually. But I think this has come up in the past, the idea, especially with teaching evaluations, and you hinted to it that maybe they are a little bit too weighted. And I think that has definitely been a concern. I think that, one, there has to be education on those individuals who are reviewing those teaching evaluations as part of a contract. One, to be able to educate them on, okay, we always have students, some students will like this, some people, students that won't. I think, though, the goal, this is the goal in the perfect world, that if our faculty, staff, if we are truly looking at the student and approach them in that compassionate way, with the mentality of, listen, we want you to be able to succeed. I'm concerned about this situation. This is what I see, what's happening. Can you help me understand? Rather than coming to them and be like, you're a cheater. You'll never be any better than this. Like, there's different ways of approaching it. Then our goal would be that student would also have that ability to respect, and wow, I'm kind of glad. And we often do have that student saying, I'm glad I was caught now, because now I really know the situation. Yes, we have the students who hate us and don't ever want to be a part of their hate K-State, hate everything about it. So I think it's twofold. That one, as it is very person-centered, and really taking back from just the topic at hand, but meeting to just saying, hey, what's going on? Help me understand this. But then there is a lot more discussion that needs to be happening about, from the teaching, the evaluations process of how are those being used, how are students learning, not students, but how are upper administration, department heads, whatever it might be, using those, knowing that it's probably not the most accurate data.
Thank you.
Especially, I'll say one other thing that's been a long conversation, and it's been on the back of my mind. I've had conversations with various people, especially when our faculty members give an XF, because those students stay on the transcript, or I guess on Canvas on their class schedule. And so they may have not been in the class for 10 weeks of the semester because they received an XF early on, but now they still have access to this teaching evaluation. So there's definitely some concerns there. Yeah.
We are about out of time. So if you have any other questions and can reach out to Camilla directly, I'm sure Camilla would be very open to that. So please join me in thanking Dr. Roberts one more time for her presentation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We have a post-event survey we've just dropped into the chat. I'll remind you of the opportunity to earn a certificate for professional development, either as a GTA or as a faculty or staff member. Next week, we have a great presentation about education in Indigenous communities by Dr. Alex Redcorn. And in 2 weeks, so some of you are probably wondering, what's this ChatGPT thing? 2 weeks, there's a whole slate of events done by us and others about artificial intelligence. And our event on that Wednesday will be by Clarissa Steele on artificial intelligence in higher ed. So please be there for that. I know this is on a lot of our minds and trying to figure out how to incorporate this into our teaching and keep everybody honest. So one more time, thank you all for being here. I hope you have a great teaching week, and we'll see you next week.